is Stevens-Johnson syndrome? That's our topic on this episode of Main Street Law. My guest is North Carolina lawyer Greg Jones, and he's going to talk with us today about this horrible disease and the legal issues that are sometimes relevant in these matters. So Greg, thanks for being with me today.
Thank you, Cindy.
Well, Greg, tell us, what is Stevens-Johnson syndrome?
Stevens-Johnson syndrome is a life-threatening disease. Basically, this disease develops in children and adults who have allergic reactions to pretty much everyday drugs, usually a type of drugs called NSAIDs, such as ibuprofen. You may hear that Advil is a common name, Tylenol, amoxicillin, all sorts of allopurinol, very, very simple drugs that we all know and have used in the past.
Well, that's actually rather frightening that it can be caused by common drugs. What is the frequency of this occurrence?
Thankfully, it's very rare. But the problem is there's no pre-indication, so there's no way for you or your children or even your doctor to know if you're predisposed to developing a sensitivity. Sometimes people who have a sensitivity to sulfur-based drugs are predisposed, but that's not always the case.
Greg, tell us what the symptoms are and how they are evidenced.
Usually the first symptoms is a rash, just a simple rash that becomes worse and worse. Some people will start having types of sores, and I mean not just little fever blisters, but sores within their mouth, their lips, their nose, their eyes, any mucous membranes, basically. For women, it could be in their genitals, but you'll start getting this rash, you'll start getting problems with your eyes, and then it can become much worse, where your skin sloughs off due to eruptions or almost like a boil that bursts. Again, damage to your mucous membranes and your organs, vision loss and blindness, and in lots of cases, death if it's not treated quickly and appropriately.
Now, Greg, you're involved in many of these cases. How does that usually come about, and how are you able to help these victims?
Usually what happens is either from previous clients, burn centers, or even the internet and reputation, people contact me once their loved one has contracted this horrible disease. Usually they get it to the point where they've gotten to a doctor that says, yes, you have Stevens-Johnson syndrome, or there's another closely related disease called toxic epidural necrosis, or TEN. Usually Stevens-Johnson syndrome, people call it SJS, but they'll meet somebody at a burn center, or a doctor from a burn unit will recommend me. By that time, they've been treated. They know they have a serious problem, whether it's from scarring from the skin eruptions, from the blindness, from the internal organ problems. Normally, I do not sue doctors, even though sometimes, especially with blindness, there may be a medical malpractice component. Normally, I sue the drug manufacturer for failure to warn. If a drug manufacturer warns that this may be a potential side effect, there's not a lot I can do, but the vast majority of these drugs do not warn, and that's when I go against the manufacturer. But what it means to the client is, I try to get your medical bills paid. I try to get you time for lost wages. I try to get you money for pain and suffering, because in these cases, there's often a lot of pain and suffering. Some of these cases can be treated in intensive care units, but the most severe ones go to the burn centers, because what basically happens is it's like your skin gets burned from the inside out, and your skin falls off, basically. It's called sloughing off. And just like a burn victim, where you have no epidermis or outside skin, it just leaves your whole body open to infection. And that's deadly. And that's why it has to be treated just like a burn, and usually in a burn center.
What is the prognosis in these cases? Do people usually recover from this?
Thankfully, if it's caught in time and you get the type of care that you need, yes, they can. Often there is permanent damage to the internal organs, and they're scarring from the rash and the eruptions. But hopefully, in most cases, if the doctor recognizes what it is soon enough, they can get them to a burn center or to an ICU where they do get the adequate treatment. And the eyesight, there's a very simple procedure to keep away the blindness. So a lot of times, there won't be any horrible injuries. But again, often there is horrible injury because it's not treated early enough, or they don't get to the burn center quick enough, or the damage is more internally than external. A lot of people, I hate to say it, when they get something like this, because they've never heard of it, And a lot of doctors haven't heard of it other than 1 minute in med school or one page in their med book. They just don't know what it is, and they do not treat it aggressively. A lot of people just don't want to realize that they have a very bad disease or illness. And that's one reason that I like talking with you and with other people through the internet and just through my daily activities to make them aware of this potential problem.
Well, as you said, a lot of doctors don't know much about this, and my guess would be that there are not a lot of lawyers that understand the complexity of these cases either. You obviously do. Now, Greg, you're headquartered in North Carolina, but you handle these cases all over the country. Isn't that true?
That's true. I'm licensed in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, but I go all over the country with these cases, and when I need to, I will associate local attorneys for purposes of going to court in those states. But I basically represent people in about every 50 states and also some territories. So I'm normally get involved only in the United States, even though we'll go to Hawaii, Alaska, and to the territories like Puerto Rico.
Greg, if someone wants more information, how can they reach you?
They can reach me directly with, either through, I have a YouTube page. I also have my own personal website, Greg Jones Law. I have specialty websites, USASJSlawyers.com, or my personal email address, greg@gregjoneslaw.com, or call me at 800-693-6903. Again, that's 1-800-693-6903. It doesn't matter where you live at. I have 24-hour answering service 7 days a week, and it's a very detailed answering service. So they know if you need me, they'll call me.
Well, Greg, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Cindy. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you.
This is Cindy Speaker for State Law TV.